Good evening. A few videos back, actually it's probably something like a month ago at this point, I said that I didn't really like the name Transport for London, the organisation that controls, well, Transport for London. A few people in the comments section asked why. So even though I said I wasn't going to make a video about it, I am going to do just that. What can I say? I am a weak-willed individual. As I said previously, though, my reasons for disliking it are entirely petty. I'm not even going to try to convince people of the merits of my argument, because when it comes down to it, the reason is I just don't like it. Why not? Well, when I was growing up, it was London Transport. It was simple and elegant. It's in London, it provides transport. There you go. Then, in 2000, it apparently became Transport for London. I say apparently because there's a bit more to it than that. I don't like Transport for London because it just isn't as elegant. It sounds like one of those fake names made up for movies, like you just want to say London Transport but you couldn't get the permission, but also your writers aren't very imaginative. That being said, most people probably just say TfL, which, to be honest, is fine. It's easy to say, it's easy to remember, it's not easily going to be confused with anything else you might say in the context. The thing for me is that I think I probably use the full name more than most people, because my videos are aimed at a broad audience who might not be based in London or even in the UK, and who therefore might not immediately know what I mean if I say TfL. So, if I have to talk about TfL in a video, I usually say Transport for London. So that's what it comes down to. My reasons are not only petty, but they basically only apply to me. But all this raises the obvious question. Why was the name changed? What was wrong with London Transport? Well, the simple reason is that Transport for London and London Transport are not the same thing. Exactly. We're going to have to go into a bit of history here. Until 1933, public transport in London was the responsibility of several different organisations. There was the Underground Group, which owned most of the Underground lines, plus a number of tram and bus operators. There was the London County Council, which owned a lot of the tram lines. There was the Metropolitan Railway, which owned the Metropolitan Line and the Northern City Line. There was the Tilling Group, which operated an awful lot of bus services, plus various smaller operators and local authorities. The Underground Group had demonstrated the value of having everything under one umbrella. Their modus operandi was to use bus and tram routes to feed into the Underground, thus creating a truly comprehensive service. So in 1933, the London Passenger Transport Board was formed. This took over control of most of the public transport services in London. It wasn't necessarily the most logical way of doing things. Its boundaries stretched far outside Greater London, for instance. It also didn't touch any railways owned by main line companies. So lines like the Waterloo and City Line and the North London Line, which might have fitted quite well into the organisation, remained out of their control. The London Passenger Transport Board was the organisation's official name, but London Transport was the public-facing name, as it were. The Underground Group was by far the biggest influence on the London Transport brand, with the simple and identifiable roundel being adopted as the logo and the Johnston typeface being used for signage across the network. The LPTB was kind of weird. It wasn't an official civic authority, but an organisation separate from government. So while it had a strong degree of independence, it was expected to pay for itself. It lasted until 1948. In 1948, nationalisation was in the air. Under the post-war Labour government, Britain's transport was to become the responsibility of the state, specifically the British Transport Commission, which operated largely independently of the government. So, out with the LPTB, in with the London Transport Executive, a division of the British Transport Commission. Unfortunately, it was not a good time for transport in Britain. The Second World War had caused an enormous amount of damage to the network, and so dreams of creating a new system for the 21st century were replaced with just trying to fix everything up and keep it going. British Railways, another division of the BTC, were draining a lot of money from the Commission as a whole. By this time, a Conservative government was in power, and they weren't so hot on this whole nationalisation business. Under the Transport Act of 1962, things would be a little different. Transport authorities were expected to be self-sufficient, and this was what would pave the way for the short-sighted closure of a lot of railway lines that were seen as unremunerative. That's a whole other discussion, though. The London Transport Executive would be replaced on the 1st of January 1963 by the London Transport Board. Basically the same thing as the London Transport Executive, but again expected to be financially self-sufficient and answerable directly to the Minister of Transport. But the board did not last long. In 1970 it was replaced by the London Transport Executive, but not the same London Transport Executive. This London Transport Executive was under the control of the Greater London Council. It eliminated the services outside of the Greater London area. London's transport would now be entirely London's responsibility, with little help from central government. The GLC and central government were not exactly buddies, and would often clash. Eventually, after pushing their luck once too often, the GLC would be dissolved in 1986 by then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. But by this time, transport in London had been out of their control for 2 years. In 1984, London Regional Transport had been formed to take it over. As with the London Transport Board, this was a separate organisation that operated under the Minister of Transport. I don't know about you, but I'm having a lot of trouble keeping up with all this. Under the LRT, the bus and underground services became separate organisations, and from 1985 a number of buses were operated by private firms. LRT lasted until 2000. That year the Greater London Authority was formed. This fulfilled much the same function that the GLC had, a governing body with specific responsibility for London. In fact, the first Mayor of London was Ken Livingstone, who had formerly been the head of the GLC. Now, despite the many changes of controlling authority since 1933, the brand for transport in London had always been London Transport. But with the Greater London Authority, that was to change. A new organisation would take charge of transport. Our friend, Transport for London. And so, finally, after nearly 70 years, London Transport would vanish. And that's where we are today. Personally, I don't see what was wrong with London Transport, but I guess TfL was supposed to be dynamic and exciting. It doesn't particularly matter, and ultimately there was no real point to this video. Oh well. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube for your kind support. You are the consistent branding to my changing ownership. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.